year. Now today, I happen to be speaking about Rabbi Nathan Cassuto, who was a famous rabbi. I believe he was a chief rabbi of the Jewish community in Florence, and he would be, I believe, unfortunately lose his life in February 1945, and very much, I think, much can be said within regards to him, but he sadly died in the Gross-Rosen concentration camp in Nazi Germany, very, very sadly over here. And it marks his Hilula over here on this specific date, here on Yud Aleph Shvat, as we're going into this week. He lived about 36 years. He was born in 1909, and he passed away in the year 1945. And he's not, let's say, the first rabbi from the Cossato family that we've spoken about before. I do believe we did record a video several months back, if I'm not mistaken, with regards to another famous rabbi that would make his mark inside Italy, respectively. So Florence, we've spoken about this country. We've already recorded, I believe, at least about 40, maybe 50 rabbis that would, let's say, be head rabbis at one stage in time in Italy. And with regard to that, and very, very interesting in of itself. So anyone, if you are tuning in live at the moment, welcome as we explore the life of the Chacham over here. So Rabbi Nathan, so he was an Italian Jewish ophthalmologist. He would serve in the rabbinate of Milan and was appointed, I believe, as the chief rabbi of the Jewish community of Florence at the end of 1942. He was very active, let's say, in underground resistance and in rescuing members of his community. He was arrested by the terrible Germans, and from January 1945, I think there are no further records of him. It's believed that he perished during the death march from the camps to Germany as the Red Army approached. And when the Germans invaded northern Italy, Rav Cassuto went from house to house to persuade the Jews to move to hiding places. Now, afterwards, he, together with others, established a Jewish-Christian underground with the aim of finding shelter for Jewish refugees, I believe in church institutions. His efforts would save, reported over here, hundreds of lives before the Nazis began their operations against the Jews of Florence. Okay, let's explore a bit with regards to his earlier part of life. Now, it's interesting. Now, he was born on the 11th of October 1909, actually in Florence, in of itself, in Italy. And so his mother's name was Rabbinit Simcha, and his father was another famous person, the person we spoke about before, Rabbi, you could say Umberto Cassuto, or Rabbi Moshe David Cassuto in of itself. Let's say we're going to speak a bit about him in a second. His father was a renowned, let's say, biblical scholar, a commentator, a historian, and let's actually say something about Rabbi Umberto Cassuto in itself. I think he himself was born in 1883 to 1951. I think he died in 19th of December 1951. He was a historian, and he was a rabbi. He was a scholar, and I think he would actually in Ugaritic literature, let's just say, he would study that in the University of Florence. He would actually be also in the University of Rome, La Sapienza, I believe. And I think it was in the year 90, when the 1938 anti-Semitic Italian racial laws would actually then, I think at that point in time, force him from his position. He would move to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So remember, I think we did speak about this inside the video we did. I think we recorded this video possibly towards the start of July last year in 2025. I remember us recording a special edition over there on that specific date. He would end up in the Hebrew University, and that would be let's say at that point, a position of time, a very important move just for himself. That's something I very much have to point out over there. Okay, so who was Rav Moshe David? Let's explore more. He was born in Florence. His father's name was Gustavo. So naturally, Gustavo would have been the grandfather of Rabbi Nathan, who we're speaking about today. And Ernesto Galetti, that was a grandmother then it would be. I believe they happen to have been a traditional Jewish family originally. He would study in the University of Florence. He would graduate in 1906. And the Collegio Rabbinico, I think he would get a rabbinic ordination in the year 1908, where I think at that point in time, the principal of this college was someone named Rabbi Samuel Hirsch Margulis, who was an Orthodox rabbi and a scholar. I think he himself happened to be from Western Ukraine and would study at the Breslau Jewish Theological Seminary and at universities of Breslau and Leipzig, I think in Germany. And he was also a rabbi in Hamburg, if I'm not mistaken. So he was a famous rabbi at that point in time. He would gain a degree and get a smicha He would teach at both institutions. I think these institutions he would come from. I think it was between the years 1922 to 1925. He himself was a chief rabbi of Florence. So before his son would be the chief rabbi, he himself was at the chief of the rabbinate. That's something very much should point out over there. I think in 1925 he became a professor of Hebrew and literature at the University of Florence. He would take a chair of Hebrew language, I believe, at the University of Rome, La Sapienza. I think in the year 1938 it happened to be, there was anti-Semitic laws would force him from his position, and he was accepted an invitation to fill the chair of biblical studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in mandatory Palestine in 1939, where I believe he would be there until he passed away in the year 1951. So he'll be in Israel seemingly for about 12 years, which was obviously a sizable amount of time, something that we very much have to point out over here. Okay, so let's explore a bit more with regards to him. I think what was Rav Umberto Cassuto's work? I think he was one of the first scholars who understood the importance of the archaeological findings from Ugarit in Syria, and various similarities, let's just say, there was, I think, at that point in time, between the Ugaritic text and the Hebrew Bible. And he would study in this and write, let's just say, a vocabulary exegesis on this in itself. I think he would have the Ha-Ela Anat and the Goddess Anat, if I'm not mistaken, 1970, the latter in of itself. I think at the first half of the 20th century, there would be doing more writings and, let's say, documents, and he would look into the Torah in itself. He'll have a documentary hypothesis and the composition of the Pentateuch in of itself, respectively, and I think this will be on different parts of Bereshit, if I'm not mistaken, and a commentary on the book of Exodus also, Sefer Shemot. And I think, very, very interesting. I think he would receive this work that he would be, it says that, just quoting Wikipedia, Rabbi Cassuto's criticisms, he was, first of all, very influential amongst many Jewish scholars, and let's just say, himself, he was very influential, but I think, some people would question also at that point in time. And I quote what Wikipedia says of it: Rabbi Cassuto felt the need to produce the most accurate possible text of the Tanakh. He realized that the texts generally published at the time had mostly been edited by non-Jews and Jews who had converted to Christianity. While Rabbi Cassuto saw no reason to believe that major alterations had been made, he felt it was important to compare these printed editions with older manuscripts as a check in of itself. I think what's interesting, he would, when it comes to manuscripts of the Tanakh, Torah, he would go back centuries, let's just say before printing actually became a thing. I think in 1944 he managed to visit the great synagogue of Aleppo in Syria and study the Aleppo Codex. And he was one of very few scholars to study this key manuscript before most of the Torah section and some of the prophets and writing sections disappeared, I think, later on in 1947. Anti-Jewish riots in Aleppo. He would research. I think he himself concluded, just reading Wikipedia over here, he says that the printed Bibles generally had an accurate text. However, he corrected the spelling of many words and made a great many corrections to the vowel points and musical notes. Apparently, he would revise also the layout of the text, its divisions into paragraphs, for example, the use of poetical lines where he deemed it appropriate, let's just say, with regards to Psalms, Proverbs, and Job, and various other matters in of itself. So, and I think he would give over various Bible commentaries, if I'm not mistaken, and I think the Jewish Virtual Library will quote him. I think his 1944, he would come out with a work called the Shirat Ha'aliyah Be'Yisrael, the Song of the Plot of Israel, which was later published, I think, in English, in Biblical and Oriental Studies #2, if I'm not mistaken. And he would write a commentary also on the Bible that became very popular in Israel. He wrote more detailed commentary on Exodus, on Shemot, and at the time of his passing had completed chapters 1 to 11 of a more detailed commentary on the book of Bereshit, Genesis, respectively. Many works, I believe, are available in English. That's something that we have to point out about him. Remember, we're speaking here now about Rav Moshe David Rav Umberto Cassuto, who was the father of Rabbi Nathan Cassuto, who we happen to be speaking about today. But he himself, Rav Umberto, was a very famous rabbi. He passed away in 1951. I believe there's a street named after him, if I'm not mistaken, in Beit Vegan in Jerusalem. I think this is somewhat something that we did visit at a later time, if I'm not mistaken. And it's an interesting family tree I think they've got in of itself. So that's something that we have to point out. Yeah, but he does have a road in Beit Vegan named after him. And he was very, let's just say, a decorated person in of itself. I think with regards to his family, there's actually a family tree I'm looking at the moment. So, which is actually quite interesting from the place I'm reading in. As I said before, I think Rabbi Umberto was married to Rabbanit Simcha. They would have 4 children, if I am not mistaken. Obviously, Rabbi Nathan was one of them over there. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he was somehow connected to Ehud Olmert. I'm not too sure how, per se. But I'll just check it out over here. I remember reading this at the time when we recorded the video over here. It says over here that... I think there'll be some form of connection with Ehud Olmert. Remember, Ehud Olmert would then go on to become a prime minister of Israel, which is very, very interesting. So there's something that we have to point out over here, friends. So I'm just looking at the family tree now. So it goes down there. Maybe I'll try and include an entire family tree. I think, from them, for example, there's from Rav Moshe David Cassuto, you find the famous Adrichal of Yisrael, someone David Cassuto, for example, and Natan Avron also would come about, and somehow on the line, I believe Ehud Olmert will also be something actually very interesting to check over, because Ehud Olmert was a prime minister of Israel, and that's something that very much I have to point out. I can't remember the exact date in of itself, but Ehud Olmert obviously was a famous person in Zionistic history. That's something that we have to very, very much point out over here, friends. Anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community over here, and welcome and educate and let's learn within regards to, let's just say, the great rabbis of famous rabbis. Yes, yeah. Okay, so let's go back to Rabbi Nathan over here, who's the son of Rabbi Moshe. His father, obviously, Rabbi Moshe David Cassuto, was a well-known, renowned Bible scholar, a commentator, historian. Now, Rabbi Nathan Cassuto would study in the Michelangelo High School in Florence, and he would attend, let's say, preparatory courses at local rabbinical seminary. He excelled in his studies. He was awarded honors for being the top student in Florence and Tuscany region. I think it was in 1927, he received the title of Maskil from the rabbinical seminary and later completed his studies to earn the title of Chacham Shalem, according to rabbinic ordination in Ashkenazic Jewish tradition. I think in 1933 he would graduate from the University of Florence with a medical degree, and come 1937 he specialized in ophthalmology. Rabbi Cassuto would serve as military physician and completed his studies. I think his career included medical research, teaching, clinical practice. He published various medical papers, I believe. I think it was in 1938 he was awarded a scholarship to study at the Rockefeller Institute in New York. I think because of racial laws at that point in time, which was enacted in Italy of that year, the fascist regime denied him a passport and prevented him from traveling to the United States of America. During, let's say, his academic years, he dedicated time to contribute to a Jewish Italian youth magazine called Israel for Youth, for example. He'd write a column over there, Tell Me Mother, where he answered children's questions about Judaism under the pseudonym Rabbi Nathan. And while Italy's racial laws were enacted, Rabbi Cassuto, I think there was obviously anti-Semitism the whole time. He was even barred from working in public medical institutions. However, he was allowed to observe, for example, surgeries as a spectator to maintain his skills. He was, I think, a director of clinic, and I think there was a Professor Bardelli would actually bring him about, even due to these racial laws. He would say, please, just come in and help at that point in time. It's reported over he was a mohel, ritual circumciser, and he was a rabbi and a physician. This famous rabbi, Rabbi Nathan Cassuto, was in of itself. So that's very interesting. Let's speak about the Second World War over here. We just came out of Holocaust Remembrance Day, a very, very solemn day in the Jewish calendar. So let's talk a bit about World War II and Jewish underground in Florence. Rabbi Cassuto played a crucial role in Jewish education in Milan. He taught Hebrew, Jewish history, and biblical studies at the Jewish High School On Via Upili, he also provided free medical services to the Jewish community. He worked to instill Zionistic values in the youth. He prepared them for pioneering settlement in Palestine. I think come 1943, Rabbi Cassuto delivered his inaugural sermon at the Great Synagogue of Florence. This is a very famous synagogue. Hopefully at one stage in time we will record a history video with regards to Jewish history of Italy in of itself. I think it's actually located in Florence, if I'm not mistaken, in Tuscany, Italy. This synagogue was completed in 1882. And interesting enough, I think it was in 1848, this synagogue, the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, Jews were granted full civic equality at that point in time. But this is a famous synagogue, obviously a Sephardi synagogue. I think it will be completed in the year 1882. This synagogue was. I'm just looking at pictures of the interior. But hopefully at one stage in time we will record a historical video. Within regards to the Jewish community of Italy, I think it's very, very important. And friends, anyone tuning in live at the moment, welcome to our community as we are exploring the life of Rabbi Nathan Cassuto here on the 11th of Shvat. We'll mark the famous Rabbi's Hilula over here, so it's very, very important, let's just say, in of itself, to commemorate and learn and educate the next generation within regards to horrors of what actually occurred from 1939 to 1940. Rabbi Nathan Cassuto was very much a hero of that period. That's something that we very much have to address and state over here from the onset. So that's very, very interesting. So I'm going to explore a bit more within regards to him, within regards to the famous, very, very famous Italian over here at that stage in time. So very, very interesting. Okay, so let's say a few more words within regards to him. He was, I think, February 1943, he delivered an inaugural sermon at the Great Synagogue of Florence. He was very much aware of the increasing danger. He urged congregations to dedicate themselves to studying Torah, uphold Jewish traditions, and remain strong in faith. His lectures covered both general topics, like, let's say, topics like science and faith, and specific Jewish subjects such as dietary laws and biblical archaeology. When the Germans occupied Florence in September 1943, Rabbi Cassuto took immediate action to warn and protect the Jewish community. I think he would have a sister, Hulda Campagnano, would later testify at, I think, the Adolf Eichmann's trial in Jerusalem. My brother went from house to house, warning Jews and urging them to hide in monasteries and small villages under assumed identities. This is what it's actually quoted over here. His warnings would save hundreds of lives before the terrible Nazis began their brutal operations against the Jews of Florence. There was arrest and deportation to Auschwitz. I think a Salvation camp, Salvation Underground group was created. The idea was to seek help from church authorities. A meeting, I think, was arranged between someone named Mathilde Cassin, Rabbi Nathan Cassuto, and the head of the Catholic Church in Florence, if I'm not mistaken. I think Mathilde Cassin-Vardi was her full name, worked extensively to save Jewish refugees who fled the horrors of the Holocaust and sought refugees in Florence. And very, very interesting enough. I think, she very much operated between, let's say, Jewish Christian underground in helping hide the people at that point in time. But eventually, I think they'll catch up at that stage. Just something I have to point out. I think it was on the 30th of January 1944, Rabbi Nathan and Anna Cassuto were deported from Milan's San Vittore prison to Auschwitz concentration camp, along with 700 other prisoners. 180 of them were from Tuscany. Of the 700, only 97 men and 31 women would survive the initial selection. In the end, only 13 men and 8 women from the transport survived the war. Anna Cassuto was among the 8 women who lived, apparently reported over. At Auschwitz, Nathan Cassuto was assigned to the men's barracks and worked as a physician. He managed to receive a brief message from his wife confirming that she was still alive. But I think it was in January 1945, as the Soviet Red Army approached Auschwitz, the Nazis forced thousands of prisoners on a death march to Gross-Rosen concentration camp, and Rabbi Cassuto was among them. He is presumed to have died in mid-February 1945. And they say a fellow inmate later recalled, is just quoting over here, I had the honor of earning Nathan Cassuto's friendship. Thanks to him, I experienced moments of peace and solace amid the hell. Rabbi Cassuto's children were hidden separately with non-Jewish families. His son Daniel would stay with Mario and Lina Santerini, and while David, I think, was sheltered by Ezio and Anna Calzi, if I'm not mistaken, that entire family would survive the war. I think it was in March 1945, the surviving members of the Cassuto family immigrated to Palestine aboard the Princess Kathleen. They had no knowledge of Anna's fate at the time, but she too survived and eventually would join them. And she later worked in laboratory at Hadassah Mount Scopus Hospital in Jerusalem. I think in 1948, in April, 13th April, she was killed in the Hadassah Convoy Massacre. And Nathan Cassuto's name was later commemorated on a memorial plaque at the Great Synagogue of Florence, it's reported over, alongside with two other local Jews who perished, I think, in 1948 Arab-Israel War. So Nathan Cassuto, much can be said within regards to him over here, and was very much a famous person, famous rabbi of his time, and one of the heroes, let's just say, of that specific period in of itself. That's something very much we have to point out over here on this, let's say, very, very important class. I will have to very much point out. Okay, so let's explore a bit more within regards to him. I think it's very, very important that we explore information from yesterday year, especially during this specific time period in of itself. And if anyone is tuning in live at the moment, welcome to our community. And it's always great to have more people on board listening. And don't forget, if you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe to the channel, and we really, really appreciate it. Okay, we are going to take a very short break at the moment, and we're going to continue just with a few more highlights within regards to the famous Chacham's life, where it marks his Hilula here on the 11th of Shvat. So we'll be back in a minute, friends. Okay, thanks everyone for being patient as we're exploring a few of the highlights in regards to a great rabbi's life, Rabbi Nathan Cassuto, over here on this special edition. So we will speak a bit more because it actually marks his Hilula, and very, very interesting over here. So let's just explore a few more things in regards to him. As I said before, he was born in 1909. He learned in the Beit Midrash, the Rabbanim over there, and I think he was very, very interesting. I think it was in 1927 he got that title of as a maskil from the Beit Midrash of the Rabbanim, if I'm not mistaken. 1933, more will be ordained as a doctor, and would study in the university over there. 1930, it was in 1934 he got married to Marat Chana, if I'm not mistaken. She was from the family of the D. Kino, I hope I pronounced it correctly, and they had 4 children, as I said before. 1937, Siem Kit Machot, he would actually work at that point in time. 1938, more would progress just within regards to his life, and very, very interesting. As I say, I think his second name was Amminadav, if I'm not mistaken. Amminadav Yona. So his total name was Rabbi Nathan Yona Cassuto, if I'm not mistaken. And you can see he really gave a grandiose sermons, and he was a key person during that entire the end of his life, where obviously it was a very, very terrible time period for everyone over there in those specific regions in itself. So that's something that we have to point out, and I recommend everyone to learn more within regards to the family. It was a very famous family, and Chacham Natan Ammindav Yona Cassuto Hashem Yikam Damo, who was murdered. And Marcus Hilula here, he passed away in the year 1945. Now, let's explore a few of the highlights from his works. He would have various different works, if I'm not mistaken. One of the teachings he would actually give is Melamed Od Mitzvot Echad Lechiyot V'Lisapeh Et Sipurim Shelo Zachu Lekach. This is one of the teachings he gives over. I think this was published in the year 1987, if I'm not mistaken. So that's very, very interesting. He would publish other works also. This is something that we have to very much point out over here. The family itself, they did a lot of writings, as just speaking about him and his father here at that stage in time. You can just see the great efforts that they took themselves over there. And let's explore another highlight. Melamed litpalel shimtzeu derachim el akavod ha'adadi. This was something I think maybe written in 1940, if I'm not mistaken, which is part of his writings. Another teaching, Shegadol Kocham Shel Tinokot Shel Beit Rabban, talking about the youth, the students in of itself, the learners in the schools, just the power that they've got within regards to their Torah studies, and so on and so forth. So you can see that there was many different famous, writings at that point in time, and it's Florence itself has a famous Jewish community of yesteryear. That's something that we very much have to point out over here. There's a lot decorated to it, and we will hopefully record a video with regards to the history of the chief rabbinate of Italy. That's definitely a big ambition, to say, in of itself, a big intention over here inside this channel, that we will take on that project over here, because we're recording about all the countries in the world we're trying to do at the moment, and it will definitely be very, very important to speak about that. I think just definitely from every single different angle perspective. But today was a Hilula of Rabbi Nathan Cassuto, who was a chief rabbi of Florence. And the Jewish community in Florence was very, very famous. Maybe we should really say something maybe about the community itself in Jewish history. Remember, Italy was always especially in the previous years, was a main center, I believe, at various points in time, especially within regards to Torah learning and so on and so forth. So the Jews of Florence, I think, was a key community, let's just say, in that specific region. So that's something to point out, friends. So we'll just explore a bit within regards to the Jews of Florence. I think obviously it's quite next to the Tuscany region in of itself, and it's always been a rich community, obviously with a great synagogue over there. I think 1931 there'll be a big drop in the after 1931 with regards to the Jewish population, and I think nowadays, if I'm not mistaken, they've repaired the Great Synagogue quite recently and established home for seniors, if I'm not mistaken, since 1957, and there's many other communities there also, so that's something that we very much have to point out over here. So friends, yeah, very, very interesting. So anyone tuning in live at the moment, welcome to our community as we're exploring the life with regards to Rabbi Nathan Cassuto over here on this special edition. So if you're live at the moment, you're new, welcome. We record a lot of different videos, and we really are a channel that really prides on ourselves for our content with regards to especially Oriental Jewry. I would love to think of myself as an Orientalist to some specific degree. How important it is to actually, let's say, perpetuate and learn more and educate with regards to great rabbis. Yes, here we can just take another short break before we wrap everything off over here. So that's something that we just will have to point out over here. So we'll just wait a minute. So just take a short break, and we'll be back just in 1 minute, friends, over here. Hi, shalom everyone. Thanks for being patient over here as we're exploring within regards to the history of famous Rabbi Nathan Cassuto. I just want to explore who were the chief rabbis of Florence in Italy at various different points of time. I think it's interesting to point out. I think they had a lot of intellectuals, let's just say, in itself on these key positions. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the key leader would be Rabbi Samuel Hirsch Margulis between 1890 to 1922, who built, let's just say, more of a modern community in of itself. And this position of the Cassutos would very much alternate, if I'm not mistaken. Rabbi Nathan Cassuto will be for 3 years to 1945, and Rav Umberto Cassuto was between 1922 possibly to 1925, but that I'll have to double check also. There was other chief rabbis, I think Dr. Kalman Friedman, if I'm not mistaken, before the war. He was known as a historian also, and Rabbi Gadi Piper, I believe is actually a more modern, let's say, chief rabbi here of modern age in of itself. So that's there's a lot of history within regards to it, and yeah, very interesting. I think the Piperno family, maybe we did record with someone that was a Piperno, if I'm not mistaken. So that's something that we will he took on this chief rabbi position. I think he was about 46 years of age, and that was a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, that's very, very important to point out. So he actually received a smicha, I think, back in the year 2007, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, seemingly with a well decorated history in of itself. And to find friends who were talking about Chief Rabbi of Florence over here, Rabbi Nathan Cassuto. If anyone is new to our community, welcome. If this is the first time anyone happens to be here, it's we're trying to become like an encyclopedia, you could say, rabbinic encyclopedia, to learn about famous rabbis of yesteryear that will really shape especially the Sephardic Jewry, the Sephardic Jewish community. And yeah, thank God we have really succeeded to a big degree in of itself. So that's very, very interesting. So Rabbi Nathan Cassuto, a famous man of his time and someone that we've spoken about on various occasions here before. So yeah, very, very interesting. And yeah, let's learn more about the great rabbis of yesterday. I think it's a good opportune time to call it a day over here. If anyone needs anything, please let me know. On if you descend from any of the great rabbis of yesterday that we happen to be speaking about, once again, just write a comment. I would love to hear more information within regards to them, or just say hi also, and we will all be able to, just get more great feedback and improve, just to say the quality, wherever the feedback obviously is obviously requesting it in of itself. So very, very interesting. I think on that note, wishing all a good night. It's quite late now, recording this close to 2 o'clock in the morning, and Shabbat Shalom also, because we are coming in that territory only a couple of days away. So thanks for watching. Take care and be well.